Hi, Odyssey Camper here with part 2 of a two-part series about refrigeration in your van. This week I've got an Alpicool cooler, which is a compressor fridge-freezer combination. Now I talked earlier in part 1 of this series about how I don't normally travel with refrigeration, but there are people who have to keep things cold like insulin, and I was asked how would you keep insulin cool in a vehicle. So in the last video I showed how to do it with ice, and in this one I'll show how to do it with a slightly more expensive solution, but one I think works better. So the nice thing about this Alpicool is it pulls 60 watts, and that's about 5 amps at 12 volts. So if you had a 22 amp hour battery, you could run this for about 4 hours if it was running all the time, but really it's only running roughly 50% of the time. So the compressor runs, it shuts off, it sits there for a while. When the temperature rises a little bit, it turns back on. So you could probably run this for 8 hours on a 22 amp hour battery. Now 22 amp hour is just about the size I used when I built my console battery pack, and similar to what you could put inside of a Sears diehard, so you could run this cooler off of that. But what's kind of cool about it is you don't need an inverter to run it. Right now I have it plugged into my battery pack, so it's running on 12 volts. It does come with a 120 volt adapter, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I can run it off the battery pack, and I have my solar panel hooked up, so it's actually running on solar without a problem. So even if you don't have an inverter built in, even if you don't have a console battery pack, if you just want to keep things cool in a standard vehicle or minivan, this is a good place to start. And you can build your battery system later and build out your solar. And I mean, 60 watts to run this thing, that's not a lot of solar. Generally you'd probably want a 100 watt panel, just because they don't produce 100 watts all the time. And that would be enough to run this during the day. Now the other thing is, it's a cooler. So when you shut off the refrigeration, everything stays cool inside. So let me open this up and show you the storage space. I'll put the unit number in the description below. This is probably a good time to say, if you watch these videos and you like them, not only subscribe, but ring the bell, and then you'll get a little reminder every time there's a new video. So be sure to ring the bell down below. Okay, so looking in here, I've got a few beers, I've got a bunch of water, and just going to switch hands here. All right, how's that for professional video? So looking down inside, I've got a bunch of water in here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, roughly 9 bottles of water, 4 beers left. And I'm keeping that all at 31 degrees. Whenever you use a refrigerator, anything that's electrically driven, in other words, not an ice cooler, you want to make sure that you keep plenty of stuff in here. Load it up as much as you can. I like to use drinking water. That gets cold, and it keeps the cold in there. So when the compressor shuts off, it doesn't have to cycle as much. And also, when you want to shut the machine off, it'll keep everything cool for a time. So you have some thermal load in there. And then there's a control panel. I'll cover this more in a moment. You can use to set your temperature. So it's a cooler, it's a refrigerator, it's a freezer, because it can get down into ice cold temperatures. It can run off of 12 volts, it can run off of 120. You have 120 available, you plug in the adapter. Sorry about the mess. I'm working on another project in here, and I can bet you can imagine what that might be. That'll be in an upcoming video. So let me bring this cooler inside and show you it in a little more detail. So I've got the cooler inside now, and it's plugged into 110. There's a 12/24 volt adapter. It doesn't really matter what the voltage going in is, but there's an adapter that comes with it, so you can plug it in. So if you have shore power available, you can plug it in, or if you want to bring it inside or store it in your garage, use it to store extra food or whatever, you can do that. This is the C15 model. I thought the C15 was a good blend of size and cost. Right now this model is $199 on Amazon, but I've looked at other times and it's been $229, so it's somewhere in that price range, around 200 bucks. That's pretty good for a freezer freezer refrigerator combo that also has a cooler. So one thing I liked about the C15, which is a 15 quart capacity, is the top is flat. So there is a larger one that has a little bump out inside and carries a little more, but I think, how much do you need to bring? So, by the way, you'll see the temperature flashing. That's just a factor of it's sync rate with the phone. It's not actually flashing to my eye. It just picks it up that way in the phone. Okay, so I have some things in here, and I'm going to move them aside here. And you can see where it gets cold on the side. There's a evaporator coil around the sides there that keeps everything cool. I normally run this at around 37, 38 degrees, so it oscillates plus or minus 5 degrees, and that would be a good temperature to store insulin. It's a nice sealer on the outside. If you wanted to freeze it, you can go colder. So here is the control panel. If I go in here and I hit the down button, let's see how low this thing will go. We're well below freezing. This is Fahrenheit, by the way, for people that are watching this other countries. Obviously you wouldn't need a refrigerator if it was 20 Celsius. Alright, so it'll go down into the minus temperatures. -4 is the limit. I'm going to say -4 Fahrenheit would be optimistic, but definitely below freezing. There are two modes that this runs in. There's an economy and a max. Right now it's in max, the red light's on. If I hit that until it says eco, then I'll run in economy mode. The power draw seemed to be the same, and whether it was in eco or max, so I think it's just how long the compressor cycles or how often it cycles. So that's the control panel, pretty straightforward. You can also turn it off if you want to. Maybe you're storing it and you have it plugged into the wall and it's inconvenient to go unplug it. There are two grab handles on the side, and then there's ventilation for the condenser and the compressor and the electronic components. This side is just the cooler with the coils, evaporator coils. Hopefully I don't get those mixed up. Evaporator coil is the part that gets cold, and then the condenser is the part that gets hot and the air blows through. So you want to make sure you don't block these vents. It needs ventilation to run. Now before I put this in the van, I want to show you one last thing. This actually comes with some packing foam when it arrives. It comes with these neat little foam layers that go under it and on top of it. So it actually fits right over the top. And I think that would actually help to keep things much colder if you put that in place. So what I'm going to do is trim that up. I want to leave open the ventilation spots in the control panel so I can see everything. So let me go ahead and cut that up and show you what it would look like. And I think using that on the top and this other one on the bottom, we're going to be able to keep things a lot cooler and reduce the load on both the compressor and your battery. So there's a little free mod that comes with it. Alright, I've got my styrofoam trimmed out to fit around the cooler. So now I've got a nice layer of thick sealed closed foam styrofoam underneath the cooler. So if the floor gets warm or whatnot, it'll protect the cooler there. Not that you'll hurt the cooler, but it'll keep things colder longer. And then on the top, I fit the other piece. You don't lose a lot of heat out the top, but it will seal, keep the air inside cold and around the seams, so that should help. I made a little cutout at the top so I can get at the control panel. I also did that because I think the control panel probably generates some heat, so you want that to vent off so it's not trapped under there. And then I cut the sides for the power and for ventilation, and then did the same thing on the other side. Let's get down here. Okay, so that's also cut out. Now looking at my kilowatt, I don't set on voltage, hold on. Set it for watts. Okay, it's currently drawing 37 watts, and that's in full power mode. It is running. I'll get down close here if you can hear it. Probably can't hear that on the mic, but I'd say you could sleep, you'd never even know it was running. Turn it on and off, you'd probably never hear it, especially if it was a few feet away from your head. So I think it's a pretty good unit overall. I've been using it for the last month and a half, and I wanted to keep it running constantly outside in my garage where it's about 90 degrees this time of the year. I wanted to make sure it could cool under those conditions. I also wanted to make sure that it would last, that it would work. So I have one test left to run on this, and that's to put it out in the van. I'm going to leave it out there for 8 hours, normal amount of time you'd be sleeping, let it run off the battery, and then in the morning I'm going to make sure that I can still start the van. And I think that'll be a pretty good test. There's no way this thing would run constantly all through the night, so I don't see it killing the battery. But I like to try these things out because theory is one thing and practice is quite another. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with this unit. Let's see how it does in the overnight test. Oh, and for the overnight test, I'll be running directly off of the cigarette lighter. that'll maximize efficiency. If I use the inverter, I'm going to get a little bit of a power loss from the inverter and then back through the power converter into the refrigeration unit. So I'll run it directly on 12 volts DC, which is what you'll want to do. Now I want to run a real-world test with this cooler, running it off of the vehicle battery. So the Odyssey has a 44 amp hour battery, and what I want to do is run this for 6 hours, which I think will simulate what you would see at a campground at night. You go to sleep, shut everything off, don't have any auxiliary power coming in, you don't have any solar, and I want to see if it'll kill the battery or if I'll be able to start the van after 6 hours. Now by my calculations, if this pulls 5 amps, 6 hours would be 30 amp hours, and it's only a 44 amp hour battery, so that's going to run it down more than 50%. However, this doesn't run all the time. It only runs about, I think, a third to 2/3 of an hour. So it should be able to handle it. So what I'm going to do is reach into the front of the van, switch over to accessory. It's 1:09 p.m. We'll come back at 6:09 and see if we can start the van. I guess I should also mention that I've got it set at 37 degrees. Right now it's reading 31 because it'll oscillate up and down a little. And I've got a little bit of load in there. So I've got my water bottles, put in 3 cans of beer. It's not stuffed full, so it should be a pretty realistic test. Let's see what happens. Well, I completed the test with the van, and I wanted to conclude this video out in the van, but the church across the street is having a Labor Day outing cookout. So they're playing loud music, and they have a car show, and it was really hard to get a good sound sample out in the driveway, so I decided to bring the Alpicool inside. The cooler worked flawlessly. I think this is a good choice if you need to keep things cold in your vehicle. What didn't work flawlessly was my experiment, and I think it's my fault. So I looked at the current draw of this cooler refrigerant system, and then I looked at the battery capacity and I calculated the number of hours it would run. I think I was off on my battery capacity, or because the battery's older it didn't work as well, or because it was 88 degrees out today, the compressor ran a lot more than I thought it would. So some combination of those things resulted in my battery going dead after about 3 hours. So I went out there and I checked it periodically, watched the voltage, and then at the end of 2.5 hours it started to dip, so I called it at 12.2 volts after 3 hours so I could make sure I could restart the van. So if you have an older battery, I wouldn't recommend running this solely off the battery for more than a couple hours. I will try it with my battery pack and see if I get better results. Again, I don't think the cooler functioned any different way than it was supposed to. It was pulling the correct amount of current per what I had calculated off of the wattage, so that part was right. I think it was just the battery that was the shortcoming. So if you're looking for a way to keep refrigeration in your van, keep something cold, keep insulin cold, as we started off talking about, I think the Alpicool is a good choice. This thing is $200 right now on Amazon. I'm sure sometime in the future when you're watching this video you'll discover that the price went up, especially when people start buying them. I think it's a really cool unit. It comes with a 120 volt adapter and also plugs in at 12 volts. The control panel is easy to use and it holds a lot, and it seems to keep things cold even when the compressor is not running. So not sure what more you could ask for. Oh, there is one more thing you could ask for. It'll fit underneath the bed in the van. So this would fit under my existing cot and under the new bed that I'm building. So I think it's a good choice for a lot of people that don't need a tall fridge. As you'll note in the post I made on odysseycamper.com, I don't care for the dorm style fridges. When you open it, you lose all the cold air that was inside, and of course you have to cool down that air again, even with a lot of thermal mass inside. They also take up a ton of space, and they have a large enough footprint that there's never a really good level place to put them. So I think for most people the Alpicool would be a better choice, at least for most people that are in a van. So sometimes experiments don't go exactly the way you want, and that's the point of doing an experiment. I think this is a good unit. I'm going to go back and look at my battery power, and it's another good argument for having one of those Sears die-hard power packs with you. If your calculations are off, you can at least start your van out in the middle of the desert. If I had tried this real time and was off in my calculations, I could be stranded out there. But I always have a spare jump pack with me, so it's not really a problem for me. Until next time, Odyssey Camper signing off. Thanks for watching.